All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first talk of the day for Mission Creek Alt. So this year we're changing things up a little bit and trying to have our programming focused really on the intersection between technology and lots of other parts of our lives. And so today we'll have kind of the intersection between technology and design and art, looking at things like furniture design and interior design and architecture. Monica teaches here at the university and runs the 3D design program. And they were kind enough to partner with us to do this, as well as to set up a small exhibit on the second floor of the library. So if you go up the stairs here or take the elevator, it will be to your left as you come off of that. Before you get to all of the stacks, there's a small area that has a few of the lamps that Monica has made, as well as a number of posters and other objects that her students and she has made. She has a history of doing a lot of different design projects and a lot of different really cool stuff, and both her and her students have won a number of awards in the design community. So I'm really excited today to hear from her a little bit about what went into making some of those things and what's happening in the space of sort of digitally influenced manufacturing as it becomes more and more accessible to more people. I think we'll be hearing more and more about this. So if everybody could welcome Monica today. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I just want to give you guys a little introduction. I'm Brazilian from Rio de Janeiro. My former degree is in architecture, so I worked for 11 years with interior design, designing malls and stores in Brazil. Then I got an MFA degree in design here at the University of Iowa, went back to Brazil, worked there as a designer and teaching, and came back to teach. And currently I'm working as a designer, and I oversee the 3D design program at the University of Iowa. So I was invited to participate in this event. And I said, what am I going to highlight? Because I only have half an hour to talk, and there's so much to talk about in terms of digital technology. So I'm going to basically go through some examples of things that I did to kind of demonstrate what can be done. So one thing that is important to understand in my experience as a designer is coming from a place and growing up in a city that has a lot of like mountains, hills, natural things, and plants. The weather is every day of the year fabulous, with blue skies all the time, and being in contact with like amazing places like our botanical garden over in Rio de Janeiro, and seeing those plants. So it's really like a natural environment that I spent many hours of my life. And these things impacted me. Moving forward with these images of some of my pieces. So most of the things I do, I make reference to those natural things with curves. And when I came back to the US to teach, the digital technology, mainly 3D printing, also known as rapid prototyping, and computer numerical control technology, most people know by CNC technology, are technologies that are like you create in the computer and you transfer files to a machine that can do things for you in fraction of like hours. Something that would take like days making, you can make much faster. So from looking at the vases, and here are two images of the two printers we have. There's so many printers nowadays. You can print in chocolate, you can print metal, you can print in clay, you can print, you name it. It's unbelievable. We only have two printers in the school. And so when I came back and there was just one printer, which is the one on the right, that prints in plastic, I said, oh, how fabulous. Because now I can really explore all these curves that would be almost like one-of-a-kind object just like 5 years ago. So it was really incredible to think, okay, now I can play with this and just go as crazy as I want. So, and then going back, making reference to that experience outdoors, and then I said, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? These machines are fabulous, but the technology was yet expensive. And in addition to that, there is always a dimension, this limitation on what you can do, because they are quite big. If I back up a little bit, they look like an appliance, a refrigerator, but yet the place where it prints is really small. And maybe I should give some just background here information. It works in layers, so it goes like on X and Y, and then Z, X, Y, Z, and builds the shape. So I said, I can't print like a big thing, but I can print small things. So what I did to make reference to these like organic forms, I started by making some rings to fully understand what the process was capable of doing with my work. So I start on the image on the top, you can see that I was playing, and computer modeling really allows anybody to try this and then make a copy, try that and make another one. And then the ring printed, and I was like, oh my gosh, and these rings are on the exhibition upstairs, so that's another reason why I'm trying to show as much as I can of the pieces that are upstairs. So I said, this is the perfect tool for me to explore, because imagine if I had to do the same shape in plastic by hand, it will take me weeks to do. And something like this prints in maybe 7 hours, 5 hours after the file is ready. So it's really amazing. On this image, this is a vase that is upstairs. And if you take the time, and you have time to check, you're going to see that it's curved in every single direction. So this is making reference to those trees or flower stems, things that I saw that are natural and they curve in different ways. So after I finished the file in the modeling software, the file is read by another software that places, as I was explaining, the machine, which you see a picture, is really hard to show a picture of the process while it's printing, just because the door needs to stay closed while it's printing. And this was something that happened by accident. So you can see the inside. So the base of one shape was printing, and this material here that is brownish is what we call support material. So as the plastic's printing on the X and Y and goes up, if I have something that I have to deposit, which is this plastic works as an extrusion process, it needs something underneath to hold that next layer that is printing. So that support material also prints simultaneously with another head to create the support that it's going to provide surface for the next layer. So the software that reads my file places automatically the support material where it's going to be necessary. So it's really handy that I don't have to do that myself. It would take time. And then it prints. You remove the piece. A vase like that would take probably like 36 hours, but if I was doing this by hand, probably a month at least. So having that done in 36 hours is quite amazing. And then it goes to a dissolving tank to remove the support material that printed with the vase. So that gets, it's not an environmentally safe technique, to be honest, but unfortunately it's needed currently. So now to go from a really small example, I'm going to take you to like the biggest thing I did with automated machines. So this is with that same idea of playing with shapes and organic forms, the stems, the tree trunks, whatever people make reference to in your head, if you think of a natural shape, even the human body, I said I want to make a place where people can sit. Now, the machine is not going to print anything like that. And even if it was printing something that size, would be extremely expensive. I cannot even think how much it would cost. Probably more expensive than a cheap car, just to give an idea of how expensive the process is. So in order to do this, in my head, I had this idea, okay, these flowery stem-looking things, if I can, I will make several of them, and I will make each one color. And I had this idea of a commercial space where I had several, all oriented in different positions, and creating shadows in different ways. And as you see through if there were several, all these spaces in between that are really important for the designer point of view, what is around the shape, how they're interacting with each other if they have a group. So I had this vision of doing something big, and I said, I have to do this. So I basically wrote a grant for the Office of the Vice President for Research at the University of Iowa, and I received a AHI, it's a Art and Humanities Initiative grant to build this stool. And how did that happen? So I spent several hours in the modeling software trying to figure out how I was going in full size if I didn't have the opportunity to print, to make a mistake and say, oh, and as we prototype an object, we usually make a full-size prototype before we do the final piece to check all the dimensions. That is the natural design process for a furniture designer. So I couldn't do that because I was working with a digital tool that if I go manually, then I'm working backwards. So I spent hours in the modeling software, and I printed little small models with the ABS printer to, in scale, measure and understand where I was heading with this. So the next phase was sending these to be milled, which is, again, a CNC technology, but different. So milling is like with an automated arm, instead of you printing, you remove material. So in this case, this is a company in Texas. They used 3 pieces of foam and like block of foam. And as you can see, there are like steps that they went through. And then you see the foam pieces like the next, the right second top pieces there. So they grabbed the blocks, they divided my file in separate files, and this automated arm came and carved out what was not needed and kept what the design was. And then these 3 pieces were joined and finished with fiberglass and automotive paint. So even the logo, my logo was possible to be attached to the piece. So I make that piece finished using the process of 3D printing for designing and the milling to manufacture the piece. So the next step, which I didn't find yet money to do, it would be to make a mold and use rotational molding as the manufacturing process so that I can make thousands of this and keep the price really low. But the cost to make a mold is really expensive for an independent designer. So the next dream I had in my head, I think I'm in the art school, I teach design in the art school, which makes my experience is slightly different than an industrial design school, because the way we approach design, we do solve problems the same way the industrial design solves, but we have freedom to try different things. And it's the process of trying some creative, crazy things that allow us to find out things that we wouldn't if we were not having fun with what we were doing. So this next piece was my intention of, okay, and now I made this gigantic piece that I loved so much, but I want to be able to pack that flat and make it smaller. How am I going to do that? So I started sketching and thinking, and I said, okay, I'm going to make sort of a honeycomb structure to the seat and create legs, so I make reference to the shape, but it's a completely different piece. And the process is going to be totally different, but yet using digital tools. So some of my, again, this experience of being next to things, architectural things. We have a city in Brazil called Ouro Preto with colonial architecture that was built by the Portuguese. And the Portuguese, they have a lot of Muslim, like Arabic architecture influence in their architecture. So structures like this called musharabi, it actually spells, I found out that in English the way it's written is very similar to the way we write in Portuguese. They have this sort of, you see through from inside, you see the outside. So I was trying to apply this to the seat of that piece. So I went to the modeling software and started modeling and thinking, okay, I have to have a structure, because one thing that matters, this piece is not upstairs, nor is the previous stool, just because there's not enough space here. Maybe in another opportunity I will be able to show this in Iowa City. So I needed to keep the structure functional and comfortable, and has to be sturdy. So the order, how the pieces interlock, matters like nobody business, to make sure that the piece is not going to rock when you sit on it. So I figured that out, and then I said, now is the time to play with a new technology. So that is the CNC technology that I was talking about, that I have a file. And what is the difference is that here I am cutting something flat. So my file is transferred to a machine that, again, there are different techniques. This is a router, so it cuts the X, Y, following a pattern, and does not move on the Z axis. So it's only X and Y, and then it cuts. And then the pieces need to be finished. So you're seeing a picture of me on the right, actually making a small prototype of the piece before the final piece was cut. So I went through a process, because this was the first time I was cutting plywood, and this is bamboo plywood, in layers like that. So it's always a learning experience. And then you finish the piece, assemble the piece. This piece was selected for a design show in the museum in Ljubljana in Slovenia. So, and I went there to give a talk. So the really interesting thing about it is that this sort of heavy looking, that yet you see through, so it makes it look lighter over these like curved legs. And it's, people ask me, is this comfortable? You have to try to believe, but it is. It doesn't hurt you. I would say if you are wearing something very thin, probably you're going to feel the structure, but if you're wearing jeans, not a problem at all, because the holes are not uncomfortable. Another example is going back to this Brazilian thing that I think is in the back of my head, and not necessarily natural all the time, but most of the time, yes, is this rick-rack bench that I don't know where that came from, but I said, oh, if I like this pattern so much, how can I translate this into something that when I overlap the layers, I can create this sort of really heavy looking texture in contrast with this really like clean surface on the outside. So I went to the computer, I said, okay, I can reorganize this in several ways, and I want to keep the reference to the rickrack piece. So this is another piece that I use the CNC technology. So in my head, does not make any sense to use CNC for cutting like a simple rectangle, because I can do that in a regular saw. So that is actually like a waste of resources and time if I'm not pushing the technology to the extreme of what the technology can offer me. So this one has several holes. There's some cutting time that it takes time to go all the holes and everything. And here you see me finishing the piece, and then you have to sand by hand. Unfortunately, that part of the process is still done by hand and waxed, and that's a fraction of the piece, and again, you can assemble that in different ways. And this is a bench. The other piece that I'm going to share with you is upstairs. This is to conclude the talk. Was inspired by the firefly. I just find this, I had this vision of I need to make some lights. So I just want to make light fixtures or some light source. And I thought about this insect. And I said, oh, what is it? What it is interesting about this insect is that the color of the light is warm, number one. And two, if you really do some research, you're going to see that the intensity of the light is also different from on the body of the insect. So it goes really strong to spreading out to the tail, and it gets like less. So I have to keep that in the piece. How am I going to do that? So again, I went to the modeling software where I tried to play with these ideas. I had a sketch in my sketchbook. And then I start playing with forms, this form, what do I do? And then I said, I have to cut this. So, and again, because I was doing that stool, I said I want to keep this sculptural light to make sort of a homage to this insect that people don't think about, and it's a fabulous living something, right? So I said I have to do this so I can pack flat, it's not heavy, and it's a sculptural. So the idea of layers that I was playing with in the stool translated over here with the same technology, CNC, but this time instead of using the wood router, I use laser to cut the plywood, because the choice of material also matters. So I'm trying to say a lot of things in such a compressed time. So I said I'm going to continue exploring wood. I'm going to use thin plywood and take advantage of the process that is laser cutting to create this burned edge to emphasize the layers in the piece. And I'm going to place the light source at the bottom so that when that is the only light source in the room, it's harder to see here because the library has the lights all over, so you needed to have less light around the piece coming from above to make reference. So the bottom has more light, and as it goes up, it filters and kind of disappears, but it's still a little bit there. And I took advantage of the piece. Then the next pieces I made, I said I want to hide the light bulb, and this is not upstairs because there was no way I could hang anything. So same layers, and I added a piece of plastic on exactly over the light bulb to completely hide the light source. And this was really interesting to me. And I start playing, okay, now I don't have to completely be exactly like the firefly, so let me try different colors. So I tried the red, I tried the blue, and it seems that people like one or the other. So this is some of my work in the show in New York, and then you can see the last pieces and the red stool in the space that I was showing my work. So basically, I'm going to wrap the talk here. So any questions from anyone? Yes.
So you say, you've gained definitely some time, you've gained probably money because it's not as expensive to do. Is there anything you feel like you've lost in starting to use some of the new technology?
Honestly, nothing. I only gained. The focus of this talk is basically how technology impacts design and art. So I'm not covering the traditional tools, which I do use. I do a lot of work that sometimes is only done by hand. This is another tool. So, and it's interesting that I use this tool to highlight the natural idea, the ideas inspired by natural things. And this is kind of interesting in my head because it's totally digital, and that's what I'm making reference to. I only gained, and I highly recommend people exploring because nowadays the 3D printing is available at such a small cost that I believe the future everybody's going to have a printer at home. So it's almost like you have a digital camera. You don't have to be a photographer to change the things in the photo, right? So I think everybody will gain. Any other questions?
Will you go into production with your stool?
I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to. I think it's a lovely piece for especially commercial areas like lobbies and places that need some color. Yeah. Yes.
When you're teaching this to students, do you see it that they tend to go in a certain direction at first when they're kind of coming at it with fresh eyes? Do they tend to go in the same direction, or do they all bring a totally unique perspective?
For the students, I think the students that I have currently, they have the transition, like they all had cell phones since like early. They were exposed to technology since early, but yet when an assignment is given to them, that I say this assignment is to experiment with this tool in particular. There is with some students, some kind of resistance in accepting that the tool is capable of doing crazy things. And they want to go back to cutting the rectangles or the squares, and it takes some time for wrap around the idea that they can totally go crazy. And going crazy is always good. That's what I explained. Because if you have your mind set to go crazy with respecting all the needs of the project and what we are looking for, which is there's so many things like balance, how that interacts with space. There's several guidelines that we have to take into account. So if you go crazy, you can always go not crazy. But if you never get out of your comfort zone, you're not experimenting with things that are going to happen anyhow. So I usually push them to do things that they do not want to, but not all of them feel so afraid of doing crazy things. Some of them just jump and do it. Yeah. Any other questions?